Well, everyone, it's time for us to go and take a look at the iPad Pro 10.5 inch and see how this particular model of the iPad Pro holds up in 2025. Now, the big thing I can tell you about this particular iPad is that for a lot of people, it's probably not necessarily worth buying in the capacity that it is anymore, I'm going to be honest, but it was a really good iPad when it first came out, and for a lot of people, it still might be a good type of iPad in terms of like what it's giving you and different things like that. But at the same time, I do think there are some better alternatives out there, and it would probably make a lot more sense to go ahead and buy an iPad that is going to be giving you an overall better experience rather than this one. So we'll take a look at it throughout this whole entire video. But first things first, if you do want to go ahead and pick up some iPads that I would recommend buying this year, links will be down in the description below. You can get them from there, and you can help support the channel at the exact same time. Now, starting off with the outside of the iPad Pro, the first thing to keep in mind is that with something like the iPad Pro 10.5 inch, this type of iPad is still giving you a really decent type of display. It's a 10.5 inch, and with that display, it's honestly not a terrible panel. A 10.5 inch panel is not really that bad, and I do think in this day and age, if you are about to go through and pick up an iPad, the panel itself here does actually look pretty good. The only thing to keep in mind here is that if you are about to go through and pick up this type of iPad, the amount of bezel around this iPad might be the only thing that's even kind of concerning. Meaning, if you're about to go through and pick up a brand new iPad or anything like that, you might want to go ahead and buy some sort of a device that might be giving you a better type of layout. And with this type of iPad, you're getting pretty big bezels on the top and the bottom, and you're even getting a home button. A home button is kind of outdated in this day and age. That is kind of one of the biggest caveats going on for this type of iPad as well. So if you are about to go through and pick up some sort of a device, like I said, it might make a little bit more sense to go through and buy an iPad that is going to be giving you probably a little bit more of a situation, a little bit more of a device than this one, in my personal opinion. On the bottom, you are getting a lightning port, which is also a little bit of a disadvantage. It would be a lot nicer to be able to go through and buy something like a device that's giving you like USB-C, for example. And that right there is another really big disadvantage for this type of iPad. It's much nicer to be able to go through and buy an iPad that is going to be giving you a better type of experience there. And like I said, that right there, it is going to be one of the bigger types of disadvantages if you're going to go through and pick up some sort of an iPad like this one. Now, on top of that, when you're looking at these iPads, another very big thing to keep in mind here too is that within these types of devices, right, you are still getting overall a pretty good type of layout, right? Like it looks good and I like the way it looks. But when you are getting this type of iPad on the back, you're getting the Apple logo on the back and you're getting a single camera setup. So that's kind of all you're getting here. There's not really like anything else super insane going on here that we haven't already seen before. It's a good layout. I do think it's a good type of iPad all throughout. But like I said before, if you are about to go through and pick up some sort of an iPad, I think it would make a lot more sense to go through and buy an iPad that is going to be giving you an overall better type of experience, probably rather than this one, at least from an exterior standpoint. The main advantage for an iPad like this though right now is the fact that it is kind of like a cheaper type of iPad. So if you wanted to go through and get an iPad that is going to be cheaper right now, this is kind of one of those types of iPads that you could get from that particular situation. So that right there could be a really cool thing depending on who you are, because you'd be able to go through and buy an iPad for a much cheaper price, and that could be a really big advantage depending on who you are from that standpoint as well. So kind of keep that in mind. Now on top of that, when you are going to go through and use this type of iPad, I think another really big thing to keep in mind here for the most part too, is that with this type of iPad, you're essentially going to be able to go through and get an iPad that's giving you a single camera setup on the backside. So there's not really anything else super kind of insane going on here that we haven't already seen before. It's very much kind of what you'd expect, right? It's a very average type of device from a camera standpoint. I would say it's pretty much in par with like an iPhone 7 type of camera. It's going to be giving you a 12 megapixel camera on the back, then a 7 megapixel camera on the front. So I do think from that side in and of itself, that is kind of one of those things to keep in mind there too. It's not a, super terrible camera. It's not like the most outdated, ugly camera of all time. I do think it's a good camera for how old this iPad is. But, it's on par with something like an iPhone 7, maybe even an iPhone 6S, right? It's like one of those types of cameras. So you have to look at your pocket. If in your pocket right now you have an iPad or an iPhone, more probably, that is a better camera than an iPhone 7, then you by far have a better camera inside of your pocket than you have inside of this iPad. But, again, people aren't really looking at iPads for this type of feature set, so I understand it. But it is just one of those things to kind of keep in mind from that standpoint as well. Now, on top of that, another very big thing to keep in mind here too is the fact that within this type of iPad, you're essentially going to be able to go through and get a device that is, it was still supported with software. I think it might still be getting some software updates, and it might actually be getting iPadOS 26. But the thing you have to keep in mind here is that with an iPad like this, you are going to be coming kind of at a point where an iPad like this is not really going to be giving you like great, amazing software updates anymore. And it would make more sense to go through and buy a different type of iPad that might be giving you an overall better type of experience in terms of a software standpoint. Because even though this thing still might be getting some software updates here and there, it would still make more sense to go through and buy an iPad that is going to be giving you an overall better type of experience from that software standpoint rather than this one. So again, I don't necessarily think it's like the worst idea of all time, but it would make a lot more sense to go through and buy an iPad that is going to be giving you an overall better type of experience from that standpoint rather than this one. So again, it kind of just depends on who you are and what you kind of take a look at from that standpoint. But I will tell you, in my personal opinion, it does make a lot more sense to possibly go through and buy some sort of an iPad that might be better than this one. So I think that right there is another one of those really big things to keep in mind there for the most part as well. And finally, when it comes down to the performance, this iPad is giving you the Apple A12 chip inside of it, or the A10X chip inside of it actually, the A10X Fusion chip inside, and this iPad is about the same performance as like an iPhone 7. So it might be a little bit less than an iPhone 7, but it's going to be roughly around that same type of caliber, right? So it's not going to be anything super insane, nothing out of the ordinary. It's going to be more or less what you'd expect inside of an iPad like this. So I will tell you, in my personal opinion, albeit it's not the biggest deal in the world, it is going to be one of those types of things that you take a look at and you would kind of wish to yourself that this iPad could give you a little bit of a better type of experience from that standpoint. It's definitely not the biggest deal in the world, but if you are about to go through and pick up a device, this one is kind of hitting the edge when it comes down to the performance in this day and age. And that's why I look at this iPad as probably being one of those types of devices that I just probably wouldn't really recommend buying anymore. So what I would probably tell you is that this type of iPad, the iPad Pro 10.5 inch, I really don't think this would be an iPad I would recommend anyone to really buy anymore. I think there are way better alternatives to this iPad than this one. I think you should go out and buy something like an iPad Pro, third generation kind of. Some of those types of iPads, an M1 iPad Air, a M2 iPad Air, an iPad 10th generation, those types of iPads I think are way better options than this one. With this type of iPad, I just don't see it really being one of those types of devices I'd recommend buying anymore. So that's the way I see it from that side. But at the same time, I do think, this iPad was a good iPad when it first came out. I just don't really think it's necessarily worth buying really pretty much in any capacity anymore. So from that side, that kind of covers it up there. If you have any other thoughts or questions, please let me know in the comment section below. Hit the like button, that will mean so much, but definitely hit that subscribe button. More importantly than everything else, I love every single one of you guys. Hopefully I'll catch you guys in the next video. Peace out till then.